Weep away my pain. Bring your healing to my heart. Help me love once again. Cares and worries get me down. Fear of failure fills my day. When I'm lost and all alone, help me, Lord, to find your way. People knocking at my door, strangers seeking love and care. Never let me turn them down. Teach me gently how to share. Children, come into my life with your laughter and your song. When will I become like them? Teach me, Lord, to sing along.
Dear friends, we had seen the important events narrated in chapter 2, and now we go to chapter 3. In chapter 3, it is a story of, as we mentioned, Elisha helping the people of Israel and Judah to gain victory in the war. And the content of the story is this. When Ahab, the king of Israel, died, his son Jehoram became the king. And when Jehoram became the king, he was just new, and Jehoshaphat was the king in Judah. As it usually happens when a king who is ruling happens to die, the vassal kingdoms under the control of the ruling king may declare independence or refuse to pay the annual tribute. It is said here that Moab was a vassal of Israel, and they were supposed to give 100,000 lambs every year to the king of Israel, and also other things. Now that Ahab the king is dead, the king of Moab by name Mesha, he refused to pay the tribute, and the new king Jehoram of Israel asked for the help of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah. And then he also asked for the support of Edom, the king of Edom. And thus we see all the three kings, Israel, Judah, and Edom, they marched forward. And since Moab had a great army, they went not directly to attack them, but they went through the hilly regions and so on. And when they had traveled for 7 days, there was a misfortune. they had no more water. No more water left for themselves and for the animals. And the land seemed to be without any water. And everybody was practically shocked. And then the king of Israel said, okay, God has punished the 3 kings to death. And he was in total despair. And Jehoshaphat, a God-fearing man, he asked his people, the people with him, is there a prophet in the area? And then they said, of course there is one. He is Elisha, a prophet who was the disciple of Elijah. And therefore, he is living in such and such a place. And hence, Jehoshaphat yearns to bring him. And when he came, he, in a defined way, said to the king of Israel, why did he call me? You should have called the prophets of your fathers, or the prophets of the gods of your fathers, whom they worshipped. Why did he call me? But Jehoshaphat asked him about the possibility of getting any water. And Elisha said, unless it is for Jehoshaphat, I would not have uttered a word. But anyhow, now he said, okay, all these barren places that you see will be filled with water, and you will have sufficient water. No need of getting worried about it. In the first hearing, it will be really tough to accept it, because there is no sign of water in the entire area. Then how the place is going to be filled with water? But when the prophets say, people naturally are supposed to accept. And Jehoshaphat believed in the word of the prophet. And they retired for the day, and the next day, by evening, they come to see that water has flown in their direction from Edom. And we see, just as the prophet said, the entire area was filled with water. And now the prophet said, okay, you and your animals drink from it, and you gather the water needed for you. And then he also said, okay, the Lord has given over to you the king of Moab and all his fortified cities. And now we find the kings, they had camped in a place, it was rather isolated, and they had their fill of water, and they were taking rest and also preparing for an attack for the next day. Hearing of the news that the 3 kings have come together to attack, the Moabite king came forward with his mighty army, and they wanted to attack the camp of Israel, Judah, and Edom. But as the kings and their soldiers were alert, they could easily handle the attacking army. And we see almost all the entire army of Moab was destroyed by Israel, Judah, and Edom. And not only that, the king fled away. And now they chased him and finally caught him. And we find they took all the fortified cities and all the cities which were really fertile, and they got all this as their own. And thus we see God helped the king of Judah and Israel through the intercession of Prophet Elisha, a great victory. Therefore, here we find the prophet is intervening for his people, and they got the victory. And this is what we can see. Therefore, the story brings out clearly the impact of trusting in the Lord totally. Jehoshaphat was always trusting in the Lord, and he was praying to the Lord. And because of the merit of his, the prophet Elisha foretold what all things are yet to happen. And thus we see he was able to save. Elisha was able to save the people of Judah, people of Israel. And therefore we say this is another incident in which Elisha took part in the political events of his own nation. And that is what we see here. Okay, and the lesson of this story, what is it, or what can be said? We need to have absolute trust in the words of the Lord. Even when we see the things are odd or set against us, if we trust in the Lord, Lord will do wonders for us. And this often is the experience of all the people who trust in the Lord. When they are troubled with so many things, when they see no way out of the situation, but still, if they have the courage to trust in God Almighty, God will come and intervene in support of their case. And here is a very clear and evident example. Okay, therefore we can see the prophet intervenes for the sake of his people because they trust in Yahweh. And that is a big lesson we can derive from it. Okay, now we go to chapter 4. And okay, before concluding, one more thing is to be said. We find towards the end of chapter 3, we find the king of Moab. He sacrificed his eldest son in order to placate their God, so that their God may intervene and they may win the battle. But nothing happened. Okay, what is the lesson of this story? Again, we can say human sacrifice was a practice of that time. When somebody wants to placate God or to please God, they would offer what is the best for them, or from among what they have, they offer the best for God. And everybody knows that the firstborn is the beloved one for any family, for any father. And here, the king of Moab, what did he do? He offered the firstborn. He is the most loved one, most precious one for the parents, and that they are ready to forsake for the sake of pleasing their God. Of course, we are to respect their intentions, but that practice is not accepted in Israel. Israel doesn't allow it. And we are to respect the laws given by Moses, and that's what we can say. And therefore, human sacrifice is not allowed. We cannot practice it. Of course, the meaning of this practice is to implore God's mercy by offering the most precious possession that one has, and that is definitely the first or the eldest son. And Moab, the king of Moab, was ready to do it, and that is just the inference we can take from the story. Okay, now we see some important events narrated in chapter 4. First of all, there is a story said about one of the disciples of Elisha. He was serving Elisha for a long time, but he happened to die. When he died, the debtors who had given him the loan came to his widow and the sons. He had 2 sons of young age. And now the debtors came and said to the woman, "If you do not pay back the loan, we will take the children and make them our bonded laborers. We will take them away." And the woman was in a great dilemma. She had no means to pay back the money. And hence, what do? And she was thinking of it for a long time, and then finally decided to approach the master, Elisha, the prophet. And when she came, of course, together with some other disciples of Elisha, and when they came, Elisha asked her, "What do you have at your home?" And she said, "We have absolutely nothing. Only a little bit of oil in one of the jars, one of the small jars. That's the only thing we have. Nothing else." And now Elisha said, "Do one thing. You collect all the available jars and containers from around your house, from other houses. Get all those things as a loan. And when you have gathered all the containers, then do one thing, or do as I say. You close the door behind you. You enter the house and close the door, and begin to pour out the oil from the small jar that you have. But keep on pouring. When one container is full, set it aside, take the second container, fill it. When the second is filled, take the third. Thus, you fill all the containers that you have at home." And she, believing in the words of the prophet, did as the prophet said, and she began to pour out the oil and fill all jars and containers that were brought. And when all the jars and containers were filled with the oil, the flow of the oil stopped abruptly, and there was no more oil to pour out because all the containers were full. And then she came back to the prophet. What am I supposed to do now? And the prophet said, sell out the oil and pay back your debtors. And with the rest of the money, you make a living for yourself and your children. Therefore, this is again another important miracle that we find done by the prophet. And when we analyze, we see the words of the prophet came to be fulfilled. And this is the experience of the widow. And therefore, believe in the words of the man of God, and they will be saved. And then we see in the next paragraph another story. Okay, and here we find the story of a Shunammite woman, a woman of Shunem. And there we find Elisha used to go by Shunem, and on the way he saw a family, and once he entered the family and they served him food and so on. And thereafter, whenever he passed by that way, he entered the house and took food and rested for some time and continued the journey. Such was the situation. And once the woman said to her husband, you see, this is a holy man of God, and he is traveling by this way once in a while. Why don't we build a room for him on the roof of the house, an upper chamber? And the man agreed, and they built a room for him, set a table, bed, everything that is needed, and also a lamp. And thereafter, whenever Elisha passed through that way, he would stop there, and after the meals he would take some rest and so on. Sometimes he stayed there in the house, and the next day continued the journey. Thus we find the woman and the husband, they were so hospitable towards the prophet Elisha. And once, while they were staying there, Elisha asked Gehazi, his servant, he is also traveling with Elisha, the prophet, and called the woman. And when the woman came and stood at the door, he asked her, okay, what should I do for you? You have done so many things for us. What can I do for you? Should I speak to the king to do something in favor of you? What do you think? And then we see, she said, we have practically all that we need. And Gehazi said, after she had gone, they have no children. And therefore, he asked the woman, he asked Gehazi to call the woman once again. And the woman came and stood at the door, and then he said to the woman, by the next season, you will be embracing a son. and she said to the man of God, "Man of God, do not tease me, or do not mock at me, and do not deceive me." That is a word she used, because she knew that it is impossible, because her husband is very old. Therefore, this may not happen, or it will not be possible for her to occur. And what would be? Now we see the woman was woman became pregnant and delivered a child, a son, and by next year, the same season, when Elisha passed by that road, came to see the child and so on, and they were all very happy, and they greatly thanked the man of God. And the child grew strong. But after a few years, when the child was walking around, he went to the reapers in the field. And when he was walking in the sun, suddenly the child began to cry out, saying, "Oh my head, oh my head." Probably he was feeling very strong pain in the head or something like that. And the husband or the father of the child said to the servants, "Carry him to the mother." And they brought the child to the mother, and the mother held the child in her hands and tried to keep the child always moving and alive. But after some time, there was no more motion, and the child was dead. And the woman was shocked. And without saying anything to anybody, the woman carried the child and put it on the bed of the man of God. And then she closed the door behind her and came away, and asked the servant to prepare a donkey for journey. And she, together with a servant, started on a journey, but she said nothing to anyone. And when they came to the prophet on Mount Carmel, there we see the prophet asked her, seeing her, "So how are you? What are the news about you, your husband, your child? Is everything okay?" And she said, "Okay, everything is fine." And when she began to talk later, she spoke about the child. And Elisha asked Gehazi, "Okay, you take my staff and go to the house of this woman and put the staff on his head, and the child will revive." But the woman said, "I will not go unless you come with me." And the woman stayed adamantly there, was not ready to go. And finally, Elisha himself was ready to go with the woman. And when he reached there, he went to his room and saw that the child is laid there on his bed. Okay, and now what is he going to do? This story we will continue to reflect upon in the coming session. Okay, thank you.
Loving God, we thank you for the blessing of reading your word together. We ask that these words of life, truth, and hope would continue to impact us in the days ahead. May your love and grace follow each of us, refreshed and blessed by you. Amen.